Never had.
Hey, family online, give us about 10 minutes. Y'all good? Y'all hear me?
I have a hard stop at 12:45. 1:45, just so you know.
Okay, I got you. We're not gonna go over.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Glad to be here.
We're getting food right now, so it's a little tight transition. So once people get their boxes and get settled, we'll start. Hopefully, I hope it's 10 minutes. It may not be, but I'm gonna do my best. Okay.
Okay. Hey, Jacoby, while we've got you on the line, I did take some time to prepare to give some history, if that'll be helpful.
Yep. No, thank you for that. Yes, it's a really tight transition, but I'm gonna do my best.
Crack that whip.
Laura. I know. He needs some help. He needs an admin. Yeah, I told him I'm gonna try because I'm on a board of Why Hunger. I don't know if you heard of it, but they focus on poverty. They already granted me money. I'm trying to get him some more. I'm just trying to get him some more. But you and I need to talk.
We do. I'm here at least for majority of the day. I got a meeting in like 15 minutes.
If not, we can talk on our own. You live here. Let's eat. Let's break bread.
You always busy.
So are you.
Yeah, you right. know, I tried one half and I was like, exactly. I had one I want to go back. What's the list of people else back in my
It says how much can we have?
Yeah, exactly. It's supposed to like. I have a million. I also need to eat. Yeah.
Does this sound good?
So kind of like the health impacts, the impacts, exposure.
We need to do a survey.
So right now, 20 air pollution, kind of understanding.
How's the facilities?
I've been here in Delmarva. I'm working on a pilot project. It's kind of more like a side project, probably not quite as much as institution, but so in North Carolina, here in Delaware. It's a really relaxing, just for time sake, you know.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, this is all right. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Baby choke. Okay. Okay, everybody. I want to welcome everyone. Hopefully, we can start this session. I'm gonna run a little bit behind. Some great sessions today. And can we quiet down? Let's quiet down. Let's equality. We're gonna get the session started. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome everyone back to our 9th annual Siege UMD EJ Symposium. The theme again is people, power, politics. I still hear a lot of talking. Come on, everybody. I know you talk quietly. We want to get our session started, everyone. Can y'all talk quietly? I'm about to start doing the clap. Okay, I don't want to do the clap. I don't do it right. So maybe I have a Queen or somebody else do that clap for us. Let's go ahead and do the clap, Queen. Get the clap going. Okay, I think that's good enough. Thank you, Queen. So today's plenary session, I'm really excited to have a discussion about NEJAC, the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. So this session is entitled 30 Years of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Was it 30 years ago? Is it October, right? October, 30 years ago, was the establishment of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. In today's session, we have members of NEJAC and folks who've been engaged in NEJAC to talk about what NEJAC is, the history of NEJAC, what it means to the EJ movement, the impact it's had, and where is NEJAC going, right? We have Sylvia O'Donoghu, she's an advisory council member of environmental justice for the state of Michigan. She's also a current member of NEJAC. Is Jerome in the room? Jerome, can you come to the stage, please? I want to make this a hybrid session. I mean, hybrid, having one of our in-person members. So Jerome Shabazz, Overbrook Education Center. Jerome is also a current member, or did you last year? This last year on NEJAC. Charles Lee is coming from another session. Charles is a senior policy advisor of Office of Environmental Justice, US EPA. He's basically our NEJAC historian because he was there from the beginning, the founder of NEJAC. We also have Dion Ferris, president of the Institute for Sustainable Communities, Yale School of Environment. Dion was one of those early, in the 1990s, early members of NEJAC. And then we have, and you heard me mention my uncle Omega and auntie Miss Brenda earlier today. Omega and Brenda Wilson, we're actually not related, y'all. Omega and Brenda Wilson with the West End Revitalization Association, Mebane, North Carolina. As I said earlier, I grew up in the EJ movement in North Carolina, and my primary community mentor was Omega, Miss Brenda, and I wouldn't be the EJ leader I am today without their guidance, without their love, without the support. So I'm gonna give y'all a shout out because I haven't seen you in a while. Omega and Miss Brenda Wilson. So we want to start this session. Then we're a little bit behind. I want to start this session and pass the mic to Dion to give background on NEJAC and the history of it and how did it come into being and her experience on NEJAC in the early years. Go ahead, Dion. You have the mic. I think you may be on mute. You're on mute, Dion. Go ahead. There you go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jacoby, my friend, Dr. Wilson. I'm also going to claim part of your growing up heritage in the environmental justice movement. I'm an OG, everybody. Thank you so much for your kind introduction and for inviting me to join the symposium today. Congratulations on what I hear from everyone is a wonderful conference, 9th anniversary, kudos. It's great to be among friends and allies today to talk about building power and politics and making transformative change. In particular, to share some movement history of driving federal systems change and to share a bit of my environmental justice journey in doing that work. Let's begin with a truism. Past is prologue, or the past sets the stage for the future. As a movement, we knew then, just as we know now, that federal leadership is essential to securing our human and civil rights and ensuring our right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. One of our earliest national movement policy milestones moving this agenda is mirrored in the policies and investments we're seeing emerge now from the Biden-Harris administration. The milestone I'm referencing is the 1994 Presidential Executive Order 12898 on environmental justice. And I want to note that this is the federal government's earliest validation of disproportionate racial and economic, environmental, and health impacts, and validation of the applicability of Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. As a movement, we recommended the issuance of that executive order and a menu of tools, including the creation of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, which is stewarded by US EPA. I must note, as we all have, that it has taken a long time from then to now. Nevertheless, this is success, and it helped lay the groundwork for the Biden-Harris administration's uptake of environmental justice, the new executive orders emphasizing racial equity and environmental justice, and the leading edge federal investments we're seeing in climate change, pollution remediation, and energy interventions. Taking a momentary step back to those early times in the movement, I am proud and privileged to have facilitated the national grassroots campaign that resulted in Executive Order 12898 and the National Council. At the time, I was at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law here in Washington, D.C., launching the first national environmental justice legal project in the country. The first National People of Color Environmental Justice Leadership Summit convened in the nation's capital. The media was starting to cover community struggles, and environmental justice was growing in momentum and public awareness. So wearing a couple of hats, my lawyer hat and my policy wonk hat, the presidential election then was really prime time to jump in with all the other stakeholder groups around the country, weighing in to influence the incoming administration of President William Jefferson Clinton and his presidential transition teams. I was the facilitator and the scribe for developing 2 environmental justice transition papers for the administration, one for US EPA and one for the Department of Justice. In those 2 papers, we delivered consensus recommendations to the incoming president and the team. I want to say here, I'm in the midst of dental surgery, so if something comes out weird, just forgive me, because I'm going to keep on going.
Okay,
so I was the facilitator and the scribe. Our recommendations emerged from all around the country and some international places too, from leaders of color and indigenous leaders and tribes and regional networks and community organizations. Lots of allies as well, HBCU, prominent HBCU scholars, and our inside game champions. We had people on the presidential transition team, and we had champions in the White House and the Domestic Policy Council and Congress, just to name a few. We recommended the executive order and a menu of tools you're all familiar with. For example, research on cumulative exposures, Title VI enforcement, policy and engagement overhauls for communities. We recommended creating a governmental committee that set an environmental justice table, and we recommended formalizing that council's roles and responsibilities under the official aegis of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. There was a lot of excitement around the historic formation of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Committee and organizing ourselves to carry our authentic voices forward and to carry forward our action agenda. I was excited to serve as the inaugural chair of the Enforcement Subcommittee. The creation of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council emulates and it evolves the early achievements of President Clinton's executive order and the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. I'll also mention that the National Committee inaugurated in 1994 is the model for many state and local committees that were formed as the result. The White House is a welcome elevation to the topmost environmental level, governmental level of the significance of equity and justice and multiracial and multicultural community inclusion and engagement, and the exchange of bottom-up solutions and ideas. I'll close my history snapshot by sharing how very glad I am to be able to say in 2023, we've come a long way at the federal level, in the states, and locally on the ground. It's thrilling to see and be a part of, along with everyone on this panel and in this session, a part of our progress towards community prosperity and resilience, environmental justice, climate justice, and energy justice as well. It's thrilling to feel the energy from this symposium and from leaders and communities and allies all around the country who are taking our global environmental justice agenda all the way. I'm honored to be on this esteemed panel. And with that, I'll close my snapshot. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. I want to now go to Omega and Brenda to talk about, their perspectives, insight, experience, stories with NEJAC. You want to go ahead, Omega?
Yes, I hope everybody can hear us. Can you hear me or fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks a lot. First of all, I'd like to make a note that we have worked with and followed Jacoby from gummy bears to to his PhD at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, his postdoc work at Michigan, and his first assistant professorship at the University of South Carolina, and many more iterations, and also recommending him to NEJAC, right? We first met Attorney Ferris, and I met Attorney Ferris and had a chance to meet with her on several occasions at NEJAC meetings and other meetings in Washington, D.C. We haven't seen her in a while, face to face in a while. We have not had the honor of meeting Sylvia as yet, but hopefully that'll happen, right? First of all, I was invited to be a member of NEJAC in 2007, a personal invitation when Charles Lee came to Washington, D.C. with Federal Officer Victoria Robinson, with attorney, with Federal Officer Victoria Robinson, and when we were completing a collaborative problem solving grant at the federal level. That's how it started in 2007, and we served to 2010 on NEJAC. I served as a community perspective member, and a lot of people have to have a challenge to understand what that means. That means a community perspective member who's bringing community experience. And one of the sections that I contributed, I worked on more than one work group, and one of the most significant work groups was the Goods Movement Recommendation Work Group. The title is much longer, and of course, if you Google it, you still should be able to find it. Because we had a challenge with a highway corridor in Alamance County, in Mebane, that was going to eliminate right where we're sitting, right? Our pretty flowers on the wall that you see, and the photographs and stuff that you see on the wall would have been gone, including our home here, right? But I'd like to make a note that the NEJAC was not responsible for saving us. The responsibility for saving us was our filing a complaint with the United States Department of Justice, right? In 1999, that's before we became members of NEJAC. And I say we, because I couldn't have done that without the work of my lovely wife. We just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary. Okay.
Woo! Congratulations.
All right.
Thank you.
So a lot of times we would have dinner with our team, our NEJAC team, and I would not be there 9 out of 10 times, because I would be in my room in the hotel eating a turkey sandwich with lettuce and tomatoes only, iced tea, and talking to my wife on the old-fashioned cell phones or the hotel phone to make sure we stayed in contact, to find out if she was okay, and she wanted to find out if I was okay. Brenda is going to share with you some information that was what we were dealing with on the ground that a lot of people at NEJAC meetings would not allow us to share. The community reality was very different on the ground than what we were allowed to share and went on record in the NEJAC meetings. So Brenda is a retired public health teacher, not public health, special education teacher of 35 years in Mississippi and North Carolina, by the way, where Jacoby was born in Mississippi, and we lived there in Jackson, Mississippi for almost 10 years. Thanks a lot, my lovely wife, Brenda Wilson.
Good afternoon. So good to be here. It's so good to see you, and good to see you too, Jacoby.
Yes,
I'm talking from Reader's Reflection to NEJAC's Justice and Injustices. Too many students live in environmental justice communities and also attend schools that should be declared environmental justice schools. Chronic contamination and pollution rob students of health, IQ, college scholarships, athletic achievement, and future leadership. And when will NEJAC address this legacy crisis at a ground level in our public schools? In June 2021, Senator Bernie Sanders' office requested WERA's support for the proposed Green New Deal for Public Education Act. Proposed funding would be $1.36 trillion total over 10 years, along with technical assistance and other resources for public schools districts to advance environmental health, economic, and educational equality. This past summer, our students here at Alamance County Schools were supposed to go back to school on September the 7th. The 5th. Well, they found out at the end of August that 5 schools had mold issues. And then they found out that out of those 5 schools, they had toxic mold issues. And this mold issue has been going on since 1999. So the school system had enough money over a period of years to rectify and take care of this situation. Well, the kids couldn't go back because Alamance County has 36 schools, and out of the 36 schools, 27 of them had mold contamination. And out of that 27, I think 10 or 15 had toxic mold contamination. So they had the money to take care of that, but they didn't. So they had to go to the county commissioners to get money, and the state, and to connect contamination that cost over $20 million to clean up. And thousands of public schools in small towns, rural, urban, and indigenous areas are reported to be at risk with environmental justices, just like Alamance County here in North Carolina. And now the board, where the board meets and where the secretaries and the superintendent, they have to clear out that building because that building has mold problems. So it's ridiculous. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and we can't take care of our children, and we can't take care of the schools that they're attending. And we have to have problems with mold and issues such as that. And it's ridiculous. NEJAC needs to do more focus on environmental justice schools and protect our children. I'm sorry. Thank you, but I'm sorry I'm on my soapbox, but I've been teaching for 35 years and I have experience being in molded schools and in a classroom that didn't have windows and on funky, stinking carpet after they cleaned it and you had the mold. So I'm a little bit tired of that. My daughter is a teacher. My son is a teacher. I have 2 grandchildren and one who's 2 years old, soon will be going to school. And I would like this problem to be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just to add real quickly, NEJAC is a place for you who have issues in your community to go provide public comments. right? So if the next NEJAC meeting, I'm not sure, my team, let us know if I can announce when the next NEJAC, or maybe the NEJAC members, current NEJAC members can let us know when the next NEJAC meeting is. But that public comment period is very important. So you have an issue in the community, you should sign up to provide public comments like Ms. Brenda just did. How you gonna put America first if you don't put your kids first, right, Ms. Brenda? So she said EJ schools. So that's an issue. We need to focus on schools that have these hazards, as she just outlined, and making sure they're getting the investments to address those issues. So we make sure we're taking care of our kids first, y'all. So thank you for that, Ms. Brenda. I want to move. I know I see Charles on. I'm gonna move now. Before I move to Charles, and I'm gonna hold you last, Jerome. Move to Sylvia next. Sylvia, can you chime in about what your experience has been in NEJAC? And just correct me, Sylvia. We overlap, right, with the end Obama. Were you on with me in Obama? So we were on NEJAC together.
At the end of the Obama administration.
So Obama, Trump, and now Biden. Can you talk about your experiences across those three presidential administrations and what's been the impact, the challenges, and what you like to see moving forward? Go ahead, Sylvia.
Sure, thank you. So I just want to start off by just really appreciating the history of work that's been done before I even came into this movement work. So I come from an anti-poverty organization based in Detroit that has done civil rights, was formed during the civil rights movement. And so my EJ exposure came in a more indirect way, right? When we're fighting for the issues of folks who are being denied some of the basic needs, services, and benefits that they're entitled to. And then when we go and try to figure out what is going on at the household level, seeing actually where they're living in the neighborhoods, right? And how that's just compounding a number of problems that they've been having. And so that's really where my entry point was, and less deep than a lot of the other esteemed folks here. And I appreciate, again, all of what you've done over the years, because it's made a difference in my learning and even my approach on the council. So as you mentioned there, Jacoby, I came in fall of 2016 at the end of the Obama administration. Gina McCarthy was the EPA administrator at the time. And the work that I had been doing was around water issues, water rights, water security, water affordability, and what happens when households and communities are denied that, and all of the household and public health consequences to people's health and well-being that stem from that, and who it is that we need to hold accountable. So ultimately, this is a local level issue, but it ends up having a lot of connections to what the EPA is allowing the states to do by way of regulation, or where the enforcement happens, and then what the states are doing in connection to the local level water providers. And it's a hot mess, right? And so when I came in, again, in that fall of 2016, one of the things that happened is we were given a charge for the Office of Water to work on recommendations around water infrastructure. So this was perfect, right? This is in the area. But I think that one of the things we found, especially when now we're moving into a different administration, we had a different EPA administrator, Mr. Pruitt, right? He wasn't there but for a minute. But we saw that, again, there were already a lot of differences in how it was that the previous administration was approaching communities, or even just the council, right? In what it is that they said we could speak to, what issues were not going to be on the table. I remember one of the things that folks were telling us is, look, we will not be talking about fracking. We're not going to be talking about race. So already there were these political guardrails, or you might even call them sort of restrictions, that were being put on the council in terms of the issues that we would be discussing publicly at the meetings, and where it is that we would be pushing the EPA to work more on. But it still didn't stop the council, right? Because I think, as you mentioned there, Attorney Ferris, your work and the work of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson had already laid some significant groundwork for what it is that the council was focusing on. Having the variety of stakeholder members there that came from impacted communities, folks that were deep in the knowledge of what the environmental justice issues were, allowed us to keep persisting, right? And so it makes a difference in being able to stay consistent with the advocacy, even across different types of administrations. But it wasn't easy, right? So we saw a lot of pushback that the council was doing and how it is that EPA leadership and staff were trying to navigate that too, right? They're still federal employees, even though we're there very much trying to say, look, we need EPA to respond more strongly or quickly to certain sets of concerns and recommendations we were making. And we saw how, you know, in some ways they're, you know, the priorities inside aren't always the priorities outside, right? And that's still something that continues to be. But we did get a number of recommendations in, you know, that ranged anywhere from, like I mentioned, that water infrastructure report that came out like in 2019, which I think was a big shift in really trying to get the Office of Water's attention on issues in the community, because as I've noted many times, I believe that there's a big disconnect in what's going on with the water utility sector and how it is that they're addressing the needs of impacted communities. That still is a big problem even around like where the money's flowing, right? And a lot of the conversations that are happening today around even the federal funding. But we did get several other things in around risk management and ethylene oxide, NEPA, worker protection standards. And folks will also remember too, that it was only 2 years before when I came out on the NEJAC, when the Flint crisis broke, right? When everyone was learning about what had happened with this community here just 70 miles north of Detroit, where we had a whole community of people that were essentially lead poisoned, right? In order to save money with this emergency management debacle that had been set up in Michigan in order to address some of the fiscal solvency questions and basically taking away the democratic systems that we had in place. Our city council members, our mayors were basically removed of their power, and emergency managers were put in place by the governor. The governor ended up having direct responsibility for what happened in Flint, right? There were more than 8 people charged with felonies, 2 persons charged with manslaughter charges, including the State Department of Health and Human Services. So we saw some real criminal actions happening, right, at the state level that ultimately had direct ties with what the EPA was supposed to be doing to protect residents, right? The state failed its regulatory responsibilities. And so we saw this again, just as a huge significant instance of what was to be played out in many other communities. And so many folks today are working like in the lead service line issues, but the Flint issue was not unique. It just became the most visible. And so while we're trying to figure out like how to put forward recommendations through the NEJAC, we see that there are times when we're also politically sort of limited by what we think the administration will tolerate, right? And so it's a space the NEJAC continues to work within, where we're trying to manage the strong advocacy needs of our communities and the calls for justice and actions and regulations and appropriate policies and enforcement against what sometimes can be a little bit of not even sort of differences of how the work gets done within like EPA priorities, but how it is that we continue to have to lean on them for the recommendations themselves. And so I'll just end here. So you'll remember that one of the things that the NEJAC did when Administrator Regan came in was we went back and looked at all sorts of years of recommendations that the NEJAC had put forward, especially during the Trump administration, and said, look, we've been speaking to a number of issues that have not gotten addressed. We didn't even get a letter that said, we got your letter, right? We got your set of recommendations, not even an acknowledgement. And said to Administrator Regan, look, we, in this 100-day letter of your administration, want to point out a number of things that are still outstanding, that are harming our communities, and that we need you to respond to immediately, right? And so he met that, right? He met that call to action, and it's been a different sort of response than I think that we saw for at least those 4 years. But the NEJAC is still very much in a place where there's reason, I believe, to still figure out how we can be effective given what is happening with a lot of ways in which we still don't get the states and even the regions to respond in ways that I think communities are calling for. So I'll pass it back to you, Shakobi, because I know there's a lot more to be said by other members. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And just to add to that, you know, those of you may not know the history of NEJAC, and we don't have a lot of time to get deep into it, but it is a model if implemented well, we could implement the regional level. So one of my things on NEJAC, we need to have regional EJACs, Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Every region should have an EJAC. We need a Region 3 EJAC. Every state should have their state level NEJAC. Now you have a NEJAC-like commission in Pennsylvania, right, Jerome? You have a commission, for those of you, I'm not sure if Bernice is in the room, the Maryland Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities, 2001, is that right? 2001, 2003, for those who know, was established. So we have a council in Virginia, right? And I'm not sure for the DC folks, you don't have an EJ council yet in DC. Now, the effectiveness of those councils have gone up and down. The commission's gone up and down over time. And as Sylvia just said, NEJAC's effectiveness has gone up and down over time. But we have to have that type of infrastructure. Just wanted to add to that. Now, Charles Lee has joined us. Charles Lee, has been a major part in the EJ movement and then Charles, we had a conversation recently. I said, I've been doing EJ work for 30 years. He said, I've been doing for 50. You didn't say how long, but I know you've been doing for a long time, Charles. So 50 plus years. So Charles is another one of the mentors for me in the EJ movement. I'm gonna give him some time. I know we're low on time. Let me just say this for the panelists. I know, Dion, you have to go. Try to go to maybe like 150. So we got like 24 more minutes. So give y'all some time. Charles, you give some words. You give some words, Jerome, and then have some lightning questions to make sure we give you enough time to get into some of these other successes, impacts, etc. But Charles, can you please give us a few minutes about your experiences on NEJAC? Again, Charles has been part of NEJAC from the beginning. So he's been affiliated with NEJAC from the beginning. So I said a few minutes, Charles, just a few minutes of reflection of your experiences on NEJAC. Go ahead, Charles.
Wow, that's a lot. There's a lot to be said. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I apologize for being late. It was just unavoidable. I had another commitment I just could not get out of. But I don't know. There's so many things to be said, but I want to say the NEJAC came out of the movement. And that's one of the things that should be really be understood. It was my Toxic Waste and Race report. One of his recommendations was the establishment of a national advisory committee that became the NEJAC. And that's probably one of the things I'm probably, you just count the things that I'm really proud of. That's probably one of them. And when the NEJAC got established, I don't know if Dion went into this, it didn't operate like other advisory committees. And, those of us who were charter members, took issue with who was being selected for the chair, because the chair, not that the person was there was a lot of good about the person, but he didn't represent the community. And that was a really fundamental thing. It wasn't about the person. It was about, where the voice of the NEJAC was going to come from, and who they spoke, what the NEJAC spoke for. That's how Richard Moore became he always said he was never the first chair of the NEJAC. He was the first elected chair of the NEJAC, And so, and I think that, Jacoby talked about these public comment periods. Never in the federal government has there been an advisory committee with the kind of public engagement, the public comment, the testimony that goes on, that has taken place at the NEJAC. And this is one of the things that, makes the NEJAC stand out among federal advisory committees. And so, and the kinds of issues that are being raised all the time, over and over and over again, and still needs to be continued to be raised, is what makes the NEJAC stand out. When I served as the first chair of the Waste and Facility Siting Subcommittee. And one of the things we did, and one of the things I was really proud of, was the fact that, this is when the brownfield issue was taking place, and we got the Office of Land and the Office of Solid Waste Emergency Response, then Tim Fields and Elliott Laws to support us and going around the country holding these public dialogues. And One of the things, we issued a report with 69 recommendations, all which the EPA implemented. And one of those led to the National Brownfields Conference that's today. The most important thing was that it helped reframe how the EPA, the foundations of the EPA program, to look at the brownfield issue, not just as looking at it from the individual site redevelopment, but how does that contribute to community revitalization as a whole, And so those are some of the things. When I when I stepped down, they gave me a plaque that says, talked about being the moral compass for EPA. And I think that that's what the NEJAC is, the moral compass for EPA. And the kind of things that, so there's two other points I want to say, because one is that just because the NEJAC spoke primarily from a community space does not mean that it is not really, it is a multi-stakeholder group, and the kinds of relationships that got built among different groups, including business and industry, was really something we can all learn from. And so it's not true that there was not that kind of collaboration, and I think it wasn't just about all of us sitting in a room, but people are really getting to know each other, and it got to be, I think, the things that we can learn about how to engage and understand what different people's perspectives are is really important. And then the last thing I would just say is that the NEJAC has become an engine for leadership, for empowerment and leadership development. I mean, a lot of people have come through the NEJAC and have gone on, and people that came to the NEJAC, perhaps, as leaders in their own right, but didn't perhaps know a lot about EPA, and then became like really effective champions and advocates. And the person that just spoke before me, Sylvia, is exactly one of those people. I have marveled at the way that she has learned about how to navigate the system at EPA, and how effective she has become, how powerful her voice has become, and and the kind of things she's brought about in terms of the work. Some of it you might not see exactly yet, but the kind of impact is going to have. One of the things I did, when I saw the NEJAC through many iterations as a charter member, as a committee chair. Then I became, when I worked for EPA at DFO, and that became the director of the Office of Environmental Justice. And one of the things I really wanted the NEJAC to do was to do what we did. We delved into issues deeply and really issued some very thoughtful, policy-oriented reports, and the idea of setting up these work groups that did that, and I think people should really read them because the thoughtfulness and the kinds of creativity that has gone into them are things that really I think everyone can learn from. And what they did is they put the voice of the community on par in these with other voices in these policy discussions, and a lot about what NEJAC is, and a lot about environmental justice is balancing, equalizing the imbalances of power. And so I think one of the things that when the history of the NEJAC is ultimately written, that is going to be one of the themes. So Jacoby, I'll stop there. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot more to be said, and I'm glad I can just contribute a few thoughts to it.
No, thank you for that, Charles. And I think it's really important, like he said, that those community voices, engagement, balancing the power, right, making sure that this work is community driven. I stated something earlier that wasn't correct. So the third anniversary is actually September 30th. I said October. Let's make sure I get the correct 30th, September 30th. I want to pass the mic to Jerome. Jerome and Sylvia, again, we were fellow members of NEJAC at the same time. One of the things I want to say in my role on NEJAC, I always talked about mapping the money. So before there was a Justice 40, all this stuff, we're talking about that early, mapping money, visualizing money, tracking the money, right? And I was a founding co-chair of the Financial Investments Justice 40 work group for NEJAC. So a lot of the work of that work group, I believe, and y'all can correct me, Charles, Sylvia, and Jerome, went into informing a lot of the RFPs that are coming out of the EPA now. So I just want to share that. So we've had a direct impact on a lot of the RFPs. Now, we couldn't impact how much is coming out and how fast it's coming out, fast and furious, but the quality of the RFPs, the focus on community, the criteria, we put a lot of work into that. So I think that shows the impact, real-time impact of NEJAC. Just want to share that with y'all. Jerome, you have the mic, reflections, your experiences. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Sokobi, Dr. Wilson.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
Listen, one of the things that I'd be remiss if I don't punctuate this point is that when we hear from Charles Lee, Omega and Brenda Wilson, when we hear from Dion Fair, this is actually history brought to life. These are people who are on the ground. When you study this, those folks who are studying environmental justice, these are folks that you'll see in the footnotes of your work. And I think we ought to really recognize that when we hear from them and we get the benefit of their contribution. And I also wanted to acknowledge Sylvia Arduino. She was my former chair, right? She was our former chair.
Yes,
so
sir.
Congratulations to her. It was a daunting work. You would think folks were getting paid for what they do, but it was a volunteer work, but she did it as if she was a CEO of a major corporation. But one of the points that was exciting to me and being a part of NEJAC was just the whole nature of people from all over the country being able to address issues. And in real time, as the years went on, when we first started, I started with Gina McCarthy, right?
Yes,
and then Scott Pruitt, and Andrew Wheeler, and then our current administrator, Michael Regan. But from the beginning to the end, we were able to see some of the recommendations that we were working on come to life. In terms of how the grant making is structured, those recommendations were taken into consideration. There are some things that I'm hearing now, even in terms of our university partners, how they're going to be reined in a little bit in terms of the indirect costs. But those are things that the members of NEJAC were actively engaged in those conversations about where injustices were in the structure of grant making. But when it first came to me, federal advisory committees, what is that all about? But the idea of NEJAC was very unique in the sense that it provided public involvement in committee activities. We helped to structure the public's participation in the work. And that's really unique. And that's really special when it relates to having this co-produced result of what it looks like to see yourself in the policy. So NEJAC is very instrumental in that. And what was also interesting for me too was NEJAC was established in 1993? But that was only 2 years after the first National Peoples of Color Environmental Leadership Summit. So all of these things that we're benefiting from today is going full circle, starting out with civil rights movements, starting out with movements of the people, of the community, and then going full circle now into not only being about environmental justice, but civil rights. So I don't want to belabor the point because all of the pioneers have said it before me, but really appreciated the opportunity. And I think it's a robust experience that all of you should be aware of, particularly when it comes to public comment and participation. Take advantage of public comment. There's a public comment period that's going to come up again around participation on grant cycles and grant costs. We always bring that issue up because those indirect costs for universities and for certain tribal territories are much higher than the amounts that usually nonprofits get. Nonprofits have this de minimis,
Yep. The
10% rate. You have organizations that get 60, 62, 63%, which means that they'll take that amount off for their administrative costs before the grant dollars even hit the benefit the communities that they're trying to serve. So we want to be able to bring equitable structure to this process. We can only make that happen through community input and community participation. And this is one of the councils, one of the FACAs that I believe actually makes a very intent effort to see to that point that these things are happening. So again, thanks for my few comments. And I'm always pleased to be in the company of such fine and great people.
Thank you for that, Jerome. I just want to add to what Jerome said. How can we, modeling what NEJAC has done and what it's doing now at the regional and state level. I want to reemphasize that point. We need to be using this type of structures in our states to do what Jerome just said, right? Do what Jerome just said. Now, we don't have a lot of time left, and as Jerome said, we have some EJ icons. Some of folks have been doing this work for a long time. So I want to do is take maybe a question or two for the panelists to just highlight real quickly. I'm gonna go to Dion first. Highlight real quickly, the successes. I mean, I know you talk about it again, but maybe just do it, a summary successes during your time and what you would see, your vision, like high level elevator speech vision for NEJAC moving forward. Go ahead, Dion.
Thank you, Jacoby. Everything that we were doing in that period of time, just like Jerome references, was really staking our claim around transformative change. We've always been about democratic inclusion and systems change, no less than sustainable realignment of our economy globally, our environment globally, and ensuring the benefits of nature and health for all, which of course also includes well-being and shared prosperity. What we did in 1994, what we did in the early years, what we've done ever since is a continuation of the level of energy and intention that grassroots folks and their allies bring to this table. The early years were the early years, and I'm glad to see how people are networking and collaborating and building power and understanding politics and really moving, continuing to shape and move a progressive agenda around this work. The federal level is one lever. It's an important lever. It is one lever among many. Jacoby references what's going on at the state and local level. Jerome references what's going on writ large around the country and around the world, and we've got to continue that work. In terms of recommendations, I don't think there's anything new under the sun. I think what we need to do is continue to double down on policy and surfacing equitable solutions, integrating our knowledge, our lived experiences, helping other stakeholders, as Charles references, understand our knowledge, understand our perspectives and where we're coming from, so that we can collaboratively with other stakeholders move those agendas. I'd like to see us spend a real concerted amount of time looking at strategic partnerships and coalitions, strategic cross-sector and multi-stakeholder alliances, because we can't do this alone. We're already doing this work. I think we need to triple down on those alliances. What's happening with the Biden administration, Harris administration, and all the remarkable accomplishments of this administration is not the end of the fight. We need to be prepared, and that's why I'm emphasizing strategic partnerships and alliances. We need to prepare for the next round of federal rubber hits the road, because it's always going to hit the road. There will always, as many speakers have referenced, be ups and downs. So I'm recommending we keep our eye on the ball, reflect on and continue to drive achievements like the Biden and Harris administration is making, like Administrator Regan and other secretaries in the administration are making that kind of progress. And remember, as the theme of this conference references, we are about the people, we are about the power, and we are about the politics and the change.
Thank you for that, Dion. I appreciate that. We appreciate you being here today. I want to move on to, again, my extended family, my uncle and aunt and uncle, Omega and Miss Brenda Wilson. Can you talk about, the challenges, the call to action, your vision for the future for NEJAC?
Well, first of all, we appreciate you inviting us and reconnecting with so many people we've met with in the past, including, we love Charles to death, and we appreciate all the times we've talked to him privately and face-to-face, he and his wife as well. You asked a question about some of the successes and challenges. We will parallel our work with NEJAC with our work with the United States Department of Justice. We cannot separate the two of them. And our FACA work, the Federal Advisory Council Association, right? But we have some successes based on a complaint we filed with the United States Department of Justice in 1999 under Title VI that referenced the Environmental Justice Executive Order 12898 signed by President Clinton at the urging of Vice President Gore. This highway corridor, we got it moved. As I mentioned earlier, we got it moved. Part of it has been built. $100 million section has been built about a quarter of a mile from where we're sitting. We saved over 70 some houses, 2 churches, African-American churches, and a historic cemetery where slaves were buried and descendants are still being buried today, as of this a few days ago, by the way, okay? It's right across the street from where we're sitting, directly across the street. That was saved. Connectors of, in addition to the highway corridor, we asked in our complaint that this community be connected because the white community from slavery time was separated from the Black community, where Black community people were forced to live without safe drinking water and sewer. So that was a part of our complaint in 1999. And we have 2 streets that connect those communities that was just open a year ago. The bypass was open a year ago. That's more millions. Right now, we have a greenway that is going to be built, and that's millions more with the corporation of the city government, who after 20 years came to us and said they should have listened to us when we filed a civil rights complaint 20 some years ago. They should have listened to us because they benefit from the new traffic patterns. So a greenway that will connect the students who can walk to school in 2 blocks in the white community rather than having to drive 2 miles is going to be built. That has already been funded. We have local government officials and county government officials and our pro bono lawyers attending our annual dinner now as guests, face-to-face, shaking hands and collaborating. All right. Those are successes, but they were not because of NEJAC, but NEJAC relationships leveraged it.
Yes, sir.
That was important. The leverage, the trigger, the thing that made it work was the fact that we filed a complaint. And we filed subsequent complaints that's gotten other corrective actions. And that's a long list that we don't have time to go into detail now. And we have more going on right now at this very minute. We had a meeting this morning relative to another major site that we're leveraging. So we have successes. The highway corridor, the goods movement is one of them. The $100 million is only a short part of it. There's 22 more miles of the 8-lane corridor that will be built to Danville, Virginia for well over $1 billion. So we changed the path of a major interstate multi-billion-dollar highway corridor between 2 states. Our little tiny organization in this little tiny room that you see us in leverage that.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna leave the last comments. We're at that. I said we want to take the 50. So Sylvia, sorry, Charles and Jerome, we're gonna no time for y'all. But one last comment, Sylvia, give us 30 seconds. Vision for the future for NEJAC. Go ahead.
Thank you there, Shakogi. I think that, again, it's going to be about how it is that the NEJAC and the new National Office of Environmental Justice External Civil Rights Office is going to be able to make stronger connections with the regions and the states. So I'm now chairing the state's EJ Advisory Council, because I've seen that we've got to also make sure that we're continuing what we're trying to do in NEJAC down to the state level. And again, using that same modeling to say, look, we don't need to reinvent anything. We don't have to rebuild. We've got a model that works. We just need to use that same sort of process and structure. And so I've been pushing that in Michigan for making sure that we're not reinventing wheels and actually doing something that works. But I think that the conversation that or the issue that you raised earlier around how it is that the money is being tracked, who's getting the funding, the conversations that tie in with Justice 40 are still very important for, again, how we're connecting from headquarters to regions to states to local governments. And so, for instance, one of the things I'm following right now is what's going on with the SRF dollars, the state revolving fund dollars that go down for water infrastructure, and how it is that bill money and those applications that our local utilities are applying for to get the funding to get out those lead service lines, to get out their water mains, to also protect housing and neighborhood roads and all the other kinds of connections that our communities are calling for. Who's getting the money? Which cities are getting the money? Which ones are not? And it matters too, again, like if those dollars are loans, if they're principal forgiveness. And so there's a lot of like tracking of those monies that our communities not only have to follow, but they have to learn to know where the monies are going, right? And they're not something that are easily found. And so it's part of, I think, the additional work that we're having to do just to be able to figure out how we not only get engaged, how our communities get the resources, but who's ultimately benefiting, from a lot of these projects right now, because it's not still our communities directly. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sylvia. Let's thank our panel, everybody. Now we're a little bit behind time. I know y'all were rushing. Appreciate y'all, family, with this NEJAC session. 30 years in NEJAC, y'all. The anniversary is September 30th of this year. It's been a major part of the EJ movement. We need to have NEJACs at the regional level, at the state level. Appreciate y'all for being part of this session. And everyone, let's move forward in the spirit of NEJAC. Go to our next set of sessions, and also, team, let's try to keep us on time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, family. Y'all take care.